Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to the new MDs, moms, doctors, and scientists working together to heal our children. My name is Zen Honeycutt. I'm the founding executive director of Moms Across America and author of the book Unstoppable: Transforming Sickness and Struggle into Triumph, Empowerment, and a Celebration of Community. We also have on this wonderful panel Dr. Stephanie Seneff. She is the author of the book Toxic Legacy: How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is Destroying Our Health and the Environment. She is an MIT senior scientist, and she is our resident expert on glyphosate, heavy metals, aluminum, and all kinds of things that contribute to the destruction of our health and the environment. We also have our host, Dr. Michelle Perro, a 43-year a former pediatrician, a current pediatrician, homeopathic pediatrician, and she is the founder of GMO Science and also the host of the New MD show, the author of the book What's Making Our Children Sick, which is fantastic. I highly recommend it, both books as well. And also her new book coming out is called What's Making Our Children Well. And today on this very special show, in just a few minutes, we'll have Aaron Seery come on. He is a lead lawyer for ICANN, Informed Consent Action Network. And we are expecting to have him on, unless there's an emergency, and a few minutes from now. And until then, we're going to be starting in and heading up, going on and talking about, censorship and propaganda and how it affects our health. And this is something that all of us are experiencing. You could be simply posting on Facebook and get put in Facebook jail for posting something that a senator said or a representative said in a senator's meeting. Has that happened to anybody else out there? Let us know in the comments. That has definitely happened to me. I quoted Senator Ron Johnson that was in a congressional hearing, put it on Facebook, and got put in Facebook jail. You are probably also experiencing censorship in mainstream media. If you turn on the TV today, you will not see information that is crucial to your health on mainstream media that you will see, for instance, on this show or on the High Wire, which Michelle and I were on last week, 2 weeks ago, or the Children's Health Defense Network. There will be information that you will consistently see being left out of mainstream media. There's also censorship happening in journals regarding agriculture, vaccines, government. Nonprofits are censoring the information they're putting out. We will discuss that in detail. Universities are censoring what they are teaching doctors, and doctors are then censoring what they say to patients. Also, artificial intelligence has been shown to censor the information that they give you through their search engines. And then we will talk about censorship that's closer to home, which is our own personal censorship. But first, we now have Aaron Seery on. Mr. Seery has successfully prosecuted class actions against large corporations, resulting in payouts to hundreds of thousands of Americans. He is a civil rights lawyer, managing partner of Seery and Glimstad LLP, and has extensive experience in a wide range of complex civil litigation matters with a focus on civil rights, class actions, and commercial litigation. We have a short video to show introducing Mr. Aaron Seery. Let's show that.
Joining us now is the attorney representing the Mazer family, Aaron Seery.
Civil rights attorney, vaccine specialist Aaron Seery.
Attorney Aaron Seery. This summer, we formally petitioned the CDC on behalf of one of our clients, demanding that they support their position that those that have natural immunity cannot afford the same liberties that the CDC says that those who have vaccine immunities can have. A young lady named Maddie DeGarry, who's 12 years old, participated in the Pfizer clinical trial for 12 to 15-year-olds, a trial that only had about 1,100 children, and she suffered a serious adverse event right after the vaccine. But the most troubling part of this story is what Pfizer and the FDA did after she was injured. They tried to brush it under the rug.
Welcome, Aaron Seery. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you. All right. Well, let's get the ball rolling. We want to know from you, what are some of the most important cases that you have represented involving censorship and health? Could you start out with just highlighting a few of those?
Censorship in particular,
Yeah, and health.
and
Please.
health. Well,
Yes.
I mean, in censorship, we did file an amicus brief in the Missouri v. Biden case, which is one of the major cases with regards to censorship on social media, and folks just trying to express themselves. It's an odd thing in that somehow the majority views think they need protections under the First Amendment, and that the First Amendment is there to make sure the majority can have their views only represented, when the whole point of the First Amendment is to protect minority views, disfavored views. That's the whole idea, is that when the neo-Nazis marched through Skokie, Illinois, a Jewish town, we say, yeah, they could do that because protecting their rights protects all our rights. We might hate what you say, we might loathe what you say, but we'll fight to the death for you to say it because it protects all our freedom. Even that ethos was alive and well when I went to law school at Berkeley, and for long after. I mean, really, that shift has only happened in the last few years. The ACLU used to be a protector of those liberties and rights. They did that, the Skokie case, if I recall correctly. And if you go to their website today, they support mandates. They support exactly the type of things that are destructive to democracy and liberty. So we, to answer your question more directly, yes, we did an amicus brief on behalf of the I Can Decide and Foreign Consent Action Network in Missouri v. Biden, pointing out the censorship that occurred there, and we assisted with the amicus brief for React 19, and we've also sought to bring litigation against Facebook and YouTube with regards to their censorship. But in the Missouri v. Biden case, the one thing that was unique about that, because lots of firms tried to bring lawsuits around for all kinds of organizations regarding censorship, but we all had to bring it in basically in federal court near Silicon Valley, because that's what the terms of service provided for all of these social media companies. Were locked into that venue effectively, and we were locked into certain statutory grounds, so to speak. But when the attorney general brought it, they could bring it in Louisiana. They could bring different kinds of claims, and they were able to break through. And thank God that they did that. It's incredible to watch the attorney general step up and do and fight for our rights. I mean, federal government's not doing it. At least the states are doing it.
And so a state attorney general, you're saying, can represent and protect our First Amendment rights better than what the job the federal government is doing right now?
They are the ones protecting our rights. See, that's the thing about rights. Remember what the Bill of Rights are. The Bill of Rights are a limitation on what the federal government can do. We have all the rights. Okay, the people. We are the country. We are America. Okay, not the government. People forget that. Some people think the government is not the country. The government is not America. We are America. We have given the government certain powers, and those powers are limited. The amendments, when you think of the Bill of Rights, what does it say, right? You shall have freedom of speech. Vis-a-vis, my kids say to me, Dad, I have freedom of speech. Not in this house, because I'm not the government. There's no First Amendment right in this house. I don't know what you're talking about. You want freedom of speech? Go fight the government. I'm not the government. You have no First Amendment rights in this house, right? Because that's what it is. The First Amendment is there to limit the government's ability to infringe on your right to speech, assembly, religion, and so forth. They're limited rights. So when the federal government oversteps that, who else is going to fight them other than civil rights attorneys, the kind of work we do, or a state attorney generals in this case? I mean, they don't always have standing to bring those claims. They can't always bring those claims. For example, when we brought a case on behalf of members of the U.S. military, of the Air Force, and we did also for the Army, and we got a class-wide injunction preventing the Air Force from kicking out over 10,000 airmen and women who did not want the COVID vaccine. So the judge stopped it, right? The Article 3 branch of government, the judiciary, said to the Article 2 branch, stop. You can't kick out those members of the Air Force. And Air Force listened. That's a functioning democracy. That's a functioning government.
when we went up on appeal to the Sixth Circuit, over 20 attorney generals, because they can't directly represent the air, but what they could do is file something called an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief. They filed a brief in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals when the Department of Justice appealed that decision on our side, supporting our position that the Air Force members who don't want the COVID vaccine because it conflicts with their faith, their convictions, should not be kicked out of the military. So the AGs have a powerful role to play, and thank goodness they stepped up. I could tell you for sure, I've been doing vaccine policy work for almost a decade, and 7 years ago, if you told me that 20 AGs would be filing an amicus brief in support of a position that people don't need to get a vaccine, shouldn't be mandated to get a vaccine, shouldn't have to wear a mask, I mean, I would have been like, it might take a few more years than that, but here we are. It's a wonderful place to be in.
Well, that's fantastic that at least some of our elected officials are stepping up to protect our First Amendment. But I love that you brought up that point, because most people think that it's the federal government that was put into place to protect our rights. And what you're saying is that it's really we, the people, that are, and the lawyers and some AGs, some attorney generals that are standing up.
Oh, Zen, look, government is not there to protect your rights ever. Government's always there to take away your. Okay, I'll give you my 2 cents on it, if I may. Okay.
Yeah, please. That's why you're on. We want to clear this up.
When you look at the long arch of history, okay, I've said this a few times. And when you look at the long arch of history, what's caused more harm and destruction to humanity more than anything else? Was it pestilence? Was it a virus? Was it bacteria? I would argue none of those things. What has wrought more destruction than anything is the idea that some central authority, a king, a dictator, a central committee, you name it, has the right and will tell you how to live your life. And when you don't listen, you know what they do? Mandates. They engage in force. They engage in censorship. They engage in all the horrible things that you consider to be government suppression. Because that's what governments always have done, right? If they can't persuade you on the merits, they bully you. They take away your rights. Oh, you can't go to school. Oh, you can't go to work. You can't leave your house. You go to jail. You go to the gulag, whatever it is. I mean, that's what governments throughout history have done. And this country was founded on the idea, as a rebellion against all of that, on all those forms of centralization of power, on the idea that individuals have the rights, that the rights are individual, meaning we each have individual and civil rights. Every American in this country, now it's not always been perfect, to be sure, but that was the underlying fundamental notion, and it expanded over 200 plus years that this country's been around, and because there's a balance, right? Freedoms come with danger. The right to free speech comes with danger. The right to let people assemble, to practice their religion. Freedoms come with danger too, but the balance that this country has struck has over time and has moved towards it is that the greater harm is to not let people have those rights. Mm-hmm. And the most scary thing that I saw during COVID, and heartened to see like pendulums swim back at least one part of the political spectrum, is this reversion to the idea of, no, you need to give up your individual and civil rights. You must listen. You must subsume those to what somebody else, what some central authority says, because they're the experts. And who is that person? Who is the person that's going to decide whether you get to have your rights to go to school and not go to school?
Yeah, for the greater
government.
Good.
It's always the government.
Greater good. The government is fighting.
And I'm it's fine if they want to recommend, they want to try to persuade, but it's once they try to take away your rights. So the government is there. The government is always taking away your rights, even when they tell you things that we all agree with as a society. It's still a restriction on what we do. The question is, what's the boundaries of how much rights they take away? And the idea is we need to limit that as little as possible.
Right. Aaron, and let's dive into. Go ahead, Michelle.
Aaron, do you think, in this summation, that people are swinging more to wanting government oversight, and that the general consensus is, yes, the government needs to step in? Because for those of us during the past few years have seen that when you went against the narrative, there was an uproar for those who support supported the narrative. So is your sense of things, having been on the legal front, is that there are more people wanting this government overreach, or maybe we are truly seeing the pendulum swing?
Well, I think I think that uh, I think that it depends on which demographic you're talking about. So I think there are some that almost clamored to have the rights taken away, bizarrely in my mind, just
Yeah,
bizarre.
yeah, it's bizarre.
They clamored, they wanted it. And then I think that there was a whole nother a demographic in this country that saw that firsthand, and in many ways, it woke people up. You know, when we used to do litigation, like I said, pre-COVID around vaccine policy, and that's all about civil individual rights, right? I mean, from my perspective, you want to get a vaccine every single day and wear 16 masks and live in your basement as a stay-at-home. That's America. That's freedom. You should do it. You're 18 and you want to do that, go for it, because it's America. You're 80 and you want to go to get a coffee shop without a mask and a vaccine and go get a latte, you should be able to do that too. That's freedom, right? But for some reason, there are a segment some segment that did think the government should do that. Why can't the government just give you its opinion, tell you what they think is good, and you make your own choice? The folks who watched those who mandated, I think they took it way too far for sure, and it woke up at least half of the country. And that's why in over 20 states, for the first time, go find me laws in American history that said you can't, it restricts the government from mandating a vaccine or mandating masks for public health reasons. They don't really exist. You now have over 20 states with laws, either legislative or executive orders, that restrict the governments in those states from requiring COVID vaccine or masks. We had the Mississippi federal court. There was no religious exemption for kids to attend school. We got a federal judge to agree with us that if Walmart could stay open, the church could stay open. If a kid can go to school with a medical exemption, they should be able to go to school with a religious exemption. Right? Simple. We had a federal judge agree with that, restored a religious exemption for the first time in Mississippi. I use those examples to show you that I think that there has been there's been a big change in terms of one half of the country that now understands that we do need to protect these rights. It's critical to let people choose. That government overreach is scary. And I'm not sure the other half of the country is there yet.
Yeah,
maybe when the government requires something they don't want, they'll come around. You know, that's the thing about mandates. It's all fine and good when you love all the products that are mandated now. So I love all the vaccines. I love masks. Great. Good for you. You love them. That's wonderful. What happens when the day comes when the government requires you or your kids to get a product you don't want? Then what are you going to do?
right. Like a medication or something like that.
Now you can't leave. You can't get a job. You can't go to school. You can't go. So now what good are all your rights? You can go freedom of speech by yourself in your house. You go to pray to the wall in your house. You can't assemble because you can't leave. All your rights are gone. I mean, that's why informed consent, medical freedom really is a fundamental right in my view, and a critical civil rights issue of our time.
Yeah, that absolutely. And I think it's important to point out that most people didn't have the perspective that you have, that they were actually clamoring to have their rights taken away. They wanted to be protected and they were willing to give up their rights. They didn't even see it probably as giving up their rights, because they wanted protection from the people around them rather than trusting their own immune system, their own, practices that they were doing. They were willing to give up their rights. And I think that it was a form of protection. And that comes from seeing the government as an entity that's actually going to protect them. And what you're doing is saying, what you're saying right now is that we're the ones that are going to protect ourselves. And that's why the Bill of Rights was put into place. And what we're seeing is the government censoring so many things, so many aspects. What is some of the most dangerous instances of censorship happening today, whether it's a case that you've worked on or not? Are there other instances that you're very concerned about censorship?
Yeah, absolutely. But just if I may make one last comment,
Sure.
Obviously it requires a bit of suspending, a bit of reason to think that my mask only works if you wear a mask, and my vaccine only works if you get your vaccine. If these products work then they should work. But again, even if they did work, even if it's true that me getting vaccinated for COVID protected you from COVID. The reality is that the greater harm really is always taking away people's freedoms and rights. And the thing about, collective consciousness in a society is that, collectively, we like to think we're smarter than individually. And when there's a real need, people all gather together and do it. When there's a need to protect the community, people do it. It's when there's, right? We don't need to be persuaded to drink water, to eat food, to keep breathing, to get some sleep, to do many of the things that just are necessary, right? We do those things without anybody. It's only when there's questions about the safety and efficacy of a product that you have to resort to force, to bullying, to mandates, to thuggery, to what I consider, frankly, to be all illegal and criminal behavior. Anytime you force somebody to inject something in a product that they don't want. That said, I answer your question now, sorry. On censorship, yeah, see, here's the part that really troubles me on censorship is that the way that the courts have dealt with censorship, and I understand why they're doing it, okay? Because I understand why the court's doing it. It's a little complicated, but they more want specific direct proof of censorship by the federal government, right? They're looking for that a bit of a cleaner straight line of federal government engages in censorship, social media company asks a social media company to engage in censorship, social media censors, right? Because I think part of what the court's trying to do is they're trying to balance what they say is the federal government's interest in trying to be able to get its message out and say, like, they should be able to say, hey, world, we think this product's bad, and so social medias do pick it up. Fine. I kind of get that balancing, but what we see, and we've done endless FOIA requests on behalf of the Informed Consent Action Network, ICANN, around censorship, to get all of the communications that various agencies and the White House have had with Facebook and all the different social media companies. And when you look at those interactions, they're careful. They try to be careful, okay? But they know what they're doing. And it's not hard to read between the lines to see that they're using the incredible power that the federal government has to get their way with these social media companies. In those instances, in my opinion, the importance of our First Amendment freedom should tip uncertainty in favor of we, the citizens, of saying, yeah, you overreached, federal government, executive branch, you overreached in censoring. But instead, it's not the way these decisions go. It's tipping the other way. It's tipping towards the federal government, in my opinion. When I say federal government, obviously that includes I mean the executive branch, right?
Right.
And
well, that also includes the corporations that are funding the federal government, don't you think?
Well, the incestuous relationship between corporate power and government is a real problem for sure. Corporate capture is a real thing. I didn't come up with it. It's in the it's in the poli-sci literature for decades. It's a well-established notion. I'll go on a little tangent, but I'll come back to censorship and saying this much. Most government agencies, I think, all mostly arise and they're from a well-meaning place by members of Congress. There's often a crisis, and in response to that crisis, they say, oh, we can fix it. We'll create another agency. We'll create more powers to an existing agency. And so they'll go and they'll fix it, right? The solution that government often has, unfortunately, for problems is more government. And when they do that, and even when they're well-meaning, here's the thing about government agencies, okay? We got 2.8 million federal employees. 2.8 million. Did you know that? It's a lot of people. What are they all doing? Let's put that aside, okay? Lots of agencies, okay? They pass every year thousands of regulations that have the same force of law as Congress. How many laws Congress passes? About 200 a year. Wow. So they're passing the laws. They got all the power. They're enforcing it all. Who's got the time, the money, and the inclination to influence those agencies? You, Zen? You, Michelle? You, Stephanie? Me, Aaron? No, not us. We have the fortune of, because ICANN supports us, we are constantly badgering federal health agencies with FOIA. We got over 2,000 FOIA requests. We sued. Then we filed 21 lawsuits against federal health agencies last month alone, almost all FOIA related. So we do that, but that's rare. That's rare. the pharmaceutical companies have billions of dollars, an incredible amount of research compared to we have like nothing comparatively. And so they have the long game to influence these agencies. And over time, maybe not a year, and maybe not even 5 years, but over time, every agency over time ends up being influenced and often captured by the very industry they're supposed to be regulating. The people that work there, they start getting offered lucrative jobs at those agents, at the big companies that they're supposed to be regulating. And there's no restriction on that for the most part. They're the ones who lobby Congress to help tilt the laws. They're the ones who lobby and get involved when they're thinking of regulations. They're the ones who often draft a lot of this stuff, right, through lobbyists. So all of these agencies, right, they eventually end up getting captured, and so yes, they then do the bidding of the companies that really have captured them. When you look at the FDA, the CDC, I mean, they don't view themselves as partners with us, the people. They view themselves as partners with pharma when it comes to vaccines. You get their internal communications. Are they communicating with ICANN? Are they communicating with any rights groups around people concerned about vaccine injury that seek to make products safer? With any product safety organization in the country? No. Who do they chummy communicating with? Pharma. You can find endless communication with Pfizer and all the different. In fact, one of the first FOIA requests we did was the Immunization Safety Office, right, at the CDC, for all their communications with Pfizer, for the head guy, Frank DiStefano, with Pfizer, Merck, GSK, and Sanofi, 4 big vaccine makers. Okay, we got back redacted emails. Now, the redaction code they used was the code you use for internal policy deliberations.
Yes.
So I said, you're saying you're engaged in policy deliberations with the pharma companies, with not just the CDC, but the Immunization Safety Office? Are you serious? I sued them in federal court. They lifted all the redactions because it's a ridiculous claim to make. And when you lift those redactions, they're just buddy. It's all on the ICANN website. I mean, this is who they're really working with. So yes, I'm not surprised that the CDC and the FDA, and it's not nefarious, it's just the way they've started to view their, they need to promote vaccines, defend vaccines. Who do they partner with to do that? Pharma companies. Instead of regulate them, they're really partners with them.
Yeah. Can I interject, Aaron?
Yeah,
I want to share this with you, that this is happening in the agriculture system as well, not just big pharma.
Oh, absolutely. It's
so
horrible.
I FOIA'd the EPA and asked for all of the memos and communications just between Bayer and just between the pesticide regulation department between 2020 and 2022, because that's when they were deciding whether or not glyphosate was, didn't cause cancer. And they got back to me 6 months later and said, it's going to take us 4 years to get you this data because there's a couple 100,000 communications just in 2 years. So let's say that's 200,000. That's over 1,200 communications between one chemical company and the EPA per day. Does that sound like corporate capture to you or not? If that doesn't sound like corporate capture, I don't know what is.
I mean, the corporate capture looks like this. You have the EPA, you have all the agencies that are involved with regulating the food industry, right? Those regulations, do they result in small farmers being able to really thrive or crushed?
Crushed, yeah.
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 Why? Why do you think that is? Just chance? Just
because
random?
The big chemical companies make money when the big farms are
chemical companies. Also big ag,
yeah.
all the big food manufacturers, they have an interest. In some ways, people, it's an irony. People think that big insurance companies, big agriculture, big pharma companies, you say, oh, well, they don't want regulation. They want to get rid of regulation. I would disagree with that assessment. I don't think that they have a problem with regulation, because even though regulation it costs them extra money and they have to go through red tape, it also keeps out competitors. It makes the barrier to entry so high and depending on the industry. So yes, they're happy to live with that because it fences off others. And when you see that in the food industry, I'm probably familiar with Representative Thomas Massey, right, who has a family farm. He's got a farm and he wants to sell his own eggs. But the red tape there creates an impossible situation. So absolutely agree with you.
Yeah. So we have somebody asking about FOIAs. If they're having problems with FOIAs, should they contact you through your website, or what do you think?
Well, most of the FOIA requests we do are related to the issue of informed consent, meaning when the government oversteps, we usually focus on those issues. You sent me something about baby formula, which was incredible. So we're going to do some FOIAs around that.
Yeah.
But we have a very a targeted way that we craft them and do them, and that's from experience. I mean, we litigate with them all day long. So
maybe that's why you're taking 4 years to get back to me, because I haven't did them the way that
millions of pages is a lot. So I mean, if that's really the case, that is troubling in and of itself. And that tells you all you need to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if there's a specific idea of something to FOIA that's important, we always love getting those emails. You can send them, go to our firm website, SiriLLP.com. There's a form you could send in ideas. You can also send them to ICANN. They often send those to us as well. But if you've already done the FOIA request and you've gone down the road, we might replicate and rebrand it. But that's, there's a certain method that we like to, and it's not, you can read our FOIA lawsuits, anybody wants. They're all publicly available. We're happy for everybody to copy exactly what we do. There's no tracing, but also there is the, we're a repeat player, so they know we will sue them.
Yes.
So yes. that does help. So if you got a good FOIA request and you're just not getting anywhere, and you think it's something that's really important, then do it. The other thing I'll say to this is this: I think one of the things that we engineered, so to speak, with FOIA was that at the very beginning it was frustrating because I guess they didn't realize we were going to sue them, so they were just being difficult and so forth. And we realized, you know what? A lot of what we want is them to just admit they haven't done stuff. So why don't we just FOIA them for stuff?
Yes.
To see if they've really done it.
We did that. Moms Across America and Informed Consent Action Network. We did a FOIA through you, Aaron. That was how we got in contact, whether or not they actually had any scientific studies to prove that the flu vaccine was safe for pregnant women. And they came back and said, we've got nothing. And yet doctors are recommending the flu vaccine for pregnant women all the time, every day. And in my opinion, that's criminal, because there's no scientific evidence base for that. There is a huge risk to pregnant women and to the fetus, and there's no scientific evidence to show that that's at all safe for pregnant women. So thank you for your participation in that, and for everything that you're doing. You're just so courageous. We so appreciate what you're doing. What can you tell the average American, what can they do about censorship? I mean, we're not all lawyers. We can't all sue the government. What do you think the average American can do about curbing censorship in their everyday life?
Well, I'd say two things. Actually, I was talking to somebody about this earlier today. One is, if you have facts, don't be afraid to say them, because somebody's going to levy a pejorative back at you, right? You make issues about GMO, you're anti-science, you're a quack. If all somebody has in response to you is a pejorative, right, is name calling, that means you've won. That means you have no substantive response, and you smile and you leave. But I would never walk away. I see this too often, because you're going to call your name. Because the safety and health of your children is important than any name is ever going to call you, ever. I mean, we were talking about this earlier today in the context of the clinical trials relied upon to license each of the vaccines on the CDC childhood schedule, right? And we put together this chart on behalf of ICANN. It's on ICANN.org/no-placebo. Real easy. It's right there. And every single vaccine, the control used, virtually none of them had a placebo. How long was safety monitored after injection? Typically days or weeks. And that is all right there, with a link to the FDA document showing exactly that. For example, the very first hepatitis B vaccine given to babies on the first day of life, or Combavax HB, right? And there's only 2 of them, or Endrix-B, was licensed, and this is in the FDA documents, in a clinical trial that monitors safety for 5 days after injection with 147 kids in the trial, and there's no control indicated. That is, I couldn't, if I was trying to come up with the most nefarious thing to say about vaccines, I won't even come up with that because nobody would believe me. In fact, do you want me to share my screen and show you the FDA document that says that?
Please.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll do that for a second, and then so I'm gonna, let me open up. Let's see if I can pull this off. All right, here we go. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, I'm gonna go to Google, to all knowing. Okay, so I just searched for can you see my screen?
No.
No.
Oh, sorry. Oh, here we go. You see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, great. So here we go. I just went to Google and I searched for the words FDA licensed vaccines on Dr. Google. And you see the very first result is vaccines licensed for use in the United States. That's on the FDA website. And we can all see I'm on the FDA website, right?
Yep.
So we're going to scroll down. These are all the vaccines licensed in the United States. So we're going to scroll down.
Woo, that's a lot of vaccines.
For the hepatitis B vaccine. Are you trying to say health is not in an injection? So in any event, here we go. So you got 4 hepatitis B vaccines. Now, only 2 of these are licensed for children. The other 2 are only for adults. Recombavax HB was the first of the 2 licensed, okay, 1986. So we're going to click on it. We're going to go to the package insert. All right. Now, anybody ever gets a drug, there's a little piece of paper that comes in the box. Yeah, you open it up.
Yep.
And under the FDA regulations, these are FDA approved documents. Section 6.1 always has to, by law, by federal law, has to summarize the clinical trial experience relied upon to license this product as safe. Let's go take a look at it, shall we?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go look.
That's a great idea. Here we go. Now, this is all the text for section 6.1, and you can see below, these are just all the reactions that happened in the clinical trial.
Psychiatric disorders, nausea.
But
Kinds of things.
here it is. Here's the one money sentence. This describes the clinical trial relied upon. Stephanie, because it might require an MIT degree to read this, I will give you the honors, please.
You're muted,
You're
Stephanie.
muted.
Right, I know,
There you go.
yes. Okay,
There
good.
you
In 3 clinical trials, 434 doses of Recombavax HB 5 microgram were administered to 147 healthy infants and children up to 10 years of age and were monitored for 5 days after each dose.
Now, here's the thing. To answer your question, just to be clear, again, this is on the FDA website. We can all see that. This is the formal license document. By the way, the first time I saw this, I was like, it cannot be. It's so ridiculous. Like, it's so ridiculous. But we also then FOIA'd the FDA for all the clinical trial reports submitted. And then we also looked at the peer-reviewed studies that were published after this. It's 5 days of safety monitoring after injection. And if you think there are some clinical trials happened after licensure, don't hold your breath. You're going to be crestfallen. There aren't. This is basically, we get parents who call us about vaccine injuries all the time. What do we want to look at? We want to look at clinical trial data, isn't it? And then we look at the post-licensure safety, which is all weaker, retrospective, epidemiological. Stephanie will tell you, you can make that stuff say anything you want, right? You see that all day long. But even that is vacuous. It's not like there's this like abundance of literature. This notion that there's just all this giant safety literature about vaccines is not the case. If it is, we try hard because we want to prove in vaccine court when we sue the federal government for vaccine injuries our case that science really is there. That all said, going back to what you were saying, Zen. You know what? I'll just show one other thing, and then I'll answer.
But hang on a second, Aaron.
Yeah.
And 1 second. So this is saying that 147 kids got 434 doses. So they each got at least 3 or 4 doses. Is that what you're saying? And then they were
saying that. Here's what I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying. There are 3 variables that you use to assess how good a clinical trial is. Number 1, okay, how long was safety monitored?
Yeah, 5
this
days.
Is given to a baby. It takes years before you can diagnose an immune dysregulation, developmental disorders, even asthma is diagnosed for years. 5 days. This
Yes.
is useless for assessing safety on that basis alone. Okay,
Yes.
you want to know if this is going to have adverse effects on a baby, you need to monitor for at least years, let alone, how about a year at least? How about 6 months? A month?
Right. Well, even if
5 days.
I've seen a lot of studies that say that 7 days after a vaccine is when a lot of kids had reactions. So this means that on the 6th or the 7th day, if that kid had brain encephalitis or died, it would not have been recorded in this study.
So you're talking about acute and chronic adverse reactions. The acute ones you're going to see immediately, which they were monitoring. It's the chronic reactions, which you're not going to see after 5 days. And I have to say, I heard you grill Dr. Plotkin on this in episode 352 on informed consent. Oh my God, I wanted to frame that interview. Here is the godfather of vaccinology, Dr. Plotkin, right? Textbook, the biggest monkey mucking vaccine. He himself, I just thought to myself, the irony that here's this lawyer, civil rights lawyer, nailing the vaccinologist, the vaccine expert, calling him out, not just on the 5-day trial observation period, but lack of placebo. And when they do use placebo, it is not a true placebo. It is a falsified placebo. So
it's another vaccine.
Well, it's just not a placebo.
It's not a placebo. It's another drug. It's a vaccine. It's an altered substance.
It's called an active control.
An active control to diminish the effects of the placebo versus the participant. So I have to say, if anyone hasn't watched episode 352 on informed consent, I mean, you schooled us all on that. I thought I was furiously taking notes on that, but it's important because the heads of the vaccinology are promoting a narrative that clearly is inaccurate. And this does fall, I think, in the purview of censorship as well. And here you are. It wasn't until their tushies were in the hot seat with the hand on the Bible did they come clean. And that's what it took.
Well, it's amazing the difference you get when I have vaccinologists, immunologists, pediatricians, virologists, when they're in a deposition under penalty of perjury. It's incredible, and confronted with the primary sources critically, because otherwise they can say anything. That's when you finally get to hear the truth. And on this point of chronic health issues, just to finish this up, even, by the way, if they did have a placebo on this in this trial, it's 5 days and it's 147 kids. That's not powered enough to detect anything but the most common reaction. This is virtually useless for almost any purpose. And on chronic health issues in the early 1980s, and of course there are numerous environmental insults that have increased in our society since the early 80s that potentially are causing chronic health in our children, not just vaccines. But I'll point out that in the early 1980s, there were only 3 routine vaccines: OPV, DTP, and MMR. That's it. 7 injections total. Okay. And the rate of chronic health in America was around 12% of kids. Today, the CDC schedule has over 90 doses of vaccines, and the chronic health in America, according to CDC, is over 50% of children have a chronic health issue. Many of those issues are immune or immune-mediated diseases or immune-mediated neurological issues. Something's gone wrong with our immune system of our kids. The CDC still doesn't know what it is. They do study after study after study, robust, large scale, looking at all kinds of factors, never vaccines. They can't figure it out. Maybe the place you want to start is the product you've over and over and over, baby, to modify their immune system that they say is systemic effect from their ear to their nose to modify, their immune system to create immunity. They say it's good, but what it can have nefarious effects. I'll just go to this, and I'm going to finally. That is a long way to go to answer your one question about censorship. But so this is the chart I mentioned earlier that we were talking about earlier today. This is a chart that has every vaccine on the CDC childhood schedule. And if anybody goes here, any parent can go here, and it's on icanndecide.org/no-placebo. And you could see, like we just did Recombavax HB right here. You could see it was 5 days of safety monitoring, no control. Here's the link to the FDA document we just looked at. And you could see this for every single vaccine, that virtually all of them, no placebo, and usually days or weeks, and maybe sometimes 6 months of safety monitoring. And when there is 6 months of safety monitoring, you finally get to see some interesting results. I could show you some but my only point on censorship was, look, if once you know this, if you look at any of this stuff, and don't be scared to say it was 5 days. Don't be scared to say the truth about these products, no matter what. To me, that's the most important thing when it comes to censorship. Because if everybody did, then it's a lot difficult. You can't censor everybody. You can't censor 100,000 people that are saying something in a social media platform. You could try to censor a few, but they can't censor everybody. And if everybody wasn't scared, you wouldn't have that issue. So to me, that's the biggest thing: is don't be afraid to speak up. Let them censor you. Let them do whatever. But you got to always speak don't let facts. Never shy away from facts because they're going to censor you. They censor. I mean, they could censor me, whatever. But they can only censor so many folks. And by the way, that's part of the problem they had. They tried pre-COVID to do the censorship too. They did, and the dam has really broken. I mean, they can't, even if Facebook wants to, and they want to because they're still trying to do the government's bidding to censor everybody. They can't. So that would be the one piece of advice I would put out there.
That's great. And can you just scroll down on this slide
Oh.
one more time? Was there one placebo out of all of these vaccines? Did I see one green section?
Oh yeah, right here, COVID. So COVID had a placebo group, the COVID vaccine. You know, if you're going to get a vaccine, by the way, based on this clinical trial, if you're going to get a vaccine based on that, then the vaccine that you should get is a COVID vaccine, because it had 6 months of safety review. It had at least 2 months of placebo control group on average, right? And it had over 30,000 people. So I'm not saying that that's sufficient. It's still anemic for what it was. But compared to other to childhood vaccine trials, it was great. I'll show you one other chart
Wait, but Aaron, hold on that the COVID vaccine trial, they did do a placebo. Then, however, I believe 3 months later, they went ahead and vaccinated the
an
placebo
average 2 months.
2 months.
So it was about an average of 2 months, meaning some were in the trial for about a month, some were 3 months, and then once it was emergency use authorized, they offered them all the vaccine, got them vaccinated right away. So you at least had 2 months, and so look. It is really troubling because, for example, let me show you something you discover when you have a placebo control group. You want to see something amazing? You ready? Here's something amazing. So you finally have a placebo control group. So you get to do a statistical comparison between the experimental group and the control group, which is the way these things should work. That's what you're supposed to compare statistically. Why? It's a new product. You don't really know how it's going to affect human beings. That's the whole point of doing a clinical trial prospectively. So you could do a statistical comparison to avoid the injection of bias. Because who's doing the trial? The FDA? No. Who? Some impartial group? No. Who? The company trying to sell it. Yeah. So you want to get rid of the bias. So when you compare the number of deaths in that period of time, we finally have a placebo group, right? Wonderful. How many died in the placebo group versus how many died in the vaccinated group? Which one do you think had more deaths?
Vaccinated.
Oh. 21 deaths in the vaccinated group, 17 in the placebo group. Again, this is the FDA documentation, okay? 21, 17. Supposed to do a statistical comparison. Did they do that? No.
It's supposed to be like 17
and assess each death, please.
It's supposed to be like 17 and 0, right? If you get the vaccine, it's supposed to work. It's supposed to prevent you from getting the disease. It's supposed to prevent death.
I mean, in a 6 month period, some people will die, car crashes and so forth, right?
Okay,
people will die, right, from other causes. The question is not whether people will die. I mean, things will cause death other than a COVID. I know that the world thought in 2020, like, that's it. If you don't get COVID, you live forever. No, you people still die. Just okay. Anyway, but the important question is the differential between those. Okay, and 21 versus 17. You should do a statistical comparison to see, is that statistically significant. They didn't even bother doing that. Stephanie, I know, smiling inside. They didn't even bother doing that. What they did is they let Pfizer look at each death and analyze, do they believe it was related to the COVID-19 vaccine? There were 9 deaths for cardiovascular reasons around in the vaccinated group, about 5 in the placebo group. I kind of seem significant, but don't worry. Pfizer made sure, listen, Stephanie, Michelle, and Zen, you guys are overreacting, okay? What are you worried? Pfizer made sure it's not related. They said it's not. They looked at it. We should all be comforted. It's okay. Everybody feel fine. How did they determine it's 95% effective? Do you remember that? They said there was about 7 or so cases of symptoms in the vaccinated group, 7 people approximately with symptoms, even though, by the way, they didn't test everybody. They just tested a small subset, 7. And there were about 100 something that they said had symptoms of COVID in the placebo group. Did they look closely at that? Did they inject? No. Oh, because that showed what it wanted. They wanted that. Oh, that gave us our 95% efficacy number. There they did a statistical comparison, but with the deaths, they didn't. It just, this is the, unfortunately, it looks like even if we had a placebo control group, they went and they played the games with it. But just to give a comparison, if I may, for a second.
Yeah.
I testified before the House Judiciary Antitrust Committee, and I submitted a formal report, which I'm going to pull up just because it's the thing that I have most readily available. So in my sworn written testimony to Congress, and I had a chance to put this up on the screen to the chagrin of some members of Congress, right? I got a chance to show them what I just showed you about childhood trials, but I want to show you something super important, okay? On the left side, the chart here, these are the top 5 selling Pfizer products of all time according to Money Inc., okay? Excluding the COVID vaccine. 4 of them are drugs. 1's a vaccine. Do you notice something different? For the drugs, multi-year follow-up for safety, and they had a placebo control group. The 1 vaccine,
the Prevnar.
And by the way, Prevnar, just to be sure, was not licensed based on a placebo-controlled trial. Prevnar was licensed based on a trial, on a trial against another experimental vaccine. I can't make that stuff up. I almost cursed, sorry. Can't make that stuff up. Go look at the package inserts. But the important point is this. Why? Why would drugs be tested like this and vaccines not? I'll answer my own question. Here's
Go ahead.
why.
Why?
It's because, in my opinion, okay, is that the primary reason is that pharmaceutical companies are on the hook for liability from drugs. They want to know whether it's safe before it goes to the market, because if it goes on the market and it hurts 100,000 people, they got to pay. They want to make money. They want to make money. That's what they're in the business to do with vaccines, because in 1986, remember I told you there were 3 routine vaccines? Well, they were causing DTM, RNPV, they were causing so much injury and liability. Every manufacturer went or stopped making them except for 1. There was 1 left for each. And Congress, in its wisdom, instead of forcing them to make a better, safer product, said, it's okay. You can keep selling your product that's hurting kids. We'll just make sure nobody can sue you. And we'll pass the National Childhood Injury Act of 1986. Not only gave immunity for those 3 products, but for all vaccine products for children that are also by adults, henceforth. Hence the explosion in that world. And hence, what I believe is what drove the differential between the clinical trials for drugs and vaccines. If Merck was on the hook for the injuries in this Hep B vaccine, or Sanofi for the IPV, and so if you look down this list, you think they would unleash this product on millions of children with that kind of clinical trial data? No way, in my opinion. No way.
5
They
days.
do not want to be on the hook.
3 days.
For
5 days, 3 days, 3 days, and
Yeah.
28 days, 6 months at the most.
Again,
At the most. Yeah.
Not me saying this. This is in the FDA documents. Everybody go look at it for themselves. So that's the divide we're talking about in terms of why drugs versus vaccines. To be clear, because people are like, why do you say the COVID vaccine was robustly trialed? Somebody's going to attack me and say, oh, you said COVID vaccines are great. I'm not saying that. I'm saying compared to childhood vaccines, COVID vaccines, clinical trial was robust, relative speaking. But compared to drugs, compared to what it should have been done, it was terribly anemic. It was totally not sufficient to show those products are safe to unleash
And even
on
the
the
trials
whole
that
world.
were done, Aaron, the 6 months, the Pfizer vaccine, they showed 1,200 deaths, and they wanted to hide that information for 75 years. Right? This is what came out after the
Oh,
fact.
oh, you mean when we sued the FDA to get them to
Yes.
release all the clinical trial data to the public,
Yeah.
and they wanted to produce it at a rate of about 500 pages a month, which would have taken about 75 years.
Yes.
Oh, you don't trust the FDA? You
No,
don't trust the FDA?
I think they
Yeah,
gotta. I think they gotta fess
why
up a little
would they do that? Why would they do that? Well, right, that was a fun case. Yeah, exactly. I
And
mean,
Aaron, but they
it's incredible because they licensed it, as I told the judge in that case, they licensed it, they got these documents, they reviewed them all, right? They say they robustly reviewed them to make sure it's safe in 100-something days, but they want 75 years to make them available to the public? Please, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, you can
So-
take your slide down so we can see your face. And
Sorry.
yeah, Stephanie
Yes.
or Michelle have
We-
any other questions
Yes,
before you
Aaron,
go.
we've been talking about how we get this information out to people, and there's no way that people can really look at this stuff and access it and understand it. This stuff is really difficult to understand and interpret. I mean, Pfizer, Moderna, what they've done is they have all these shenanigans they do. They give thousands of pages of data and studies. You don't need thousands of pages, by the way, but they just obfuscate the data. Really hard to decide what is valuable. It's very hard to get. So that's why we appreciate ICANN and the Highwire and our programs, because they make it so difficult for the average human to figure this out. We need the people's court back, where you come on and help people understand these legal issues in layman's terminology. I mean, that's what we're doing for health. The new MDs and new LDs, lawyers, doctors, and scientists, or something like that. But that's the next show, Aaron. You can take that.
Well, I'll give you a quick rule of thumb.
Give us a quick rule.
If there's a product and the company that's selling it to you won't stand behind it and agree to be liable for the injuries it causes, why don't you think about whether you want to inject that into your children? How about that as just a starting point? There's no reason, right? Pfizer, Moderna say, will you assume liability if my child's injured? I got to live with my kid afterwards. I got to take care of them. Will you assume liability? You say it's safe, so then will you stand behind it? Hey, these products, most of these vaccines have been out for a decade or two. You're telling me you don't now know that they're safe enough such that you can get rid of the immunity liability? You make billions a year from them.
Yeah.
If they won't stand behind the product, it's not often wise to potentially use them. How about that as just a quick starting
You have
point?
that form. I believe you have a form on the ICANN network on episode 352, where you tell people, ask the manufacturers, will they stand behind their product?
Right.
And
we have a form letter. You can send them.
You have a form, and people can download that form and ask Merck, GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, Moderna to sign before they accept an experimental therapeutic.
And your pediatrician too, because they're also immune under the 86 Act. Ask them to sign and just say, hey, look, you tell me it's safe, doc. I appreciate that. Willing to stand behind that. Not just words, in practice. It's a lot better to judge people by what they do, not what they say.
Aaron, are you seeing a lot of people come to you saying now it's not safe? We're experiencing turbo cancer. We believe that the vaccines cause those. Are you getting those types of requests for, class action lawsuits, even though it's not really very easy to sue the manufacturer because of the 1986 Vaccine Injury Act? Are you having people come to you for vaccine damage now?
Oh, if you mean COVID vaccine,
yeah.
One group alone in this country called React 19, credible group, you probably know of them, right? Has over 36,000 Americans that have claimed that they were seriously injured by COVID vaccine. That's just one group, as an example.
Okay.
Our phone, we've got endless inquiries about COVID-19 vaccines, and we get inquiries about other vaccines all the time. I mean, the issue is like which is what you just said. For COVID vaccine injuries, there's no claim we can really bring. There's a federal program called the CICP. It's the Counter Injury Compensation Program. And I'm not giving legal advice when I say this, to be clear. But I think it was one of the major news outlets called me because we brought a federal lawsuit to challenge the constitutionality of the CICP and the PrEP Act. And we did that on the basis that what I'm about to tell you. that the CICP, in terms of due process, is the equivalent of the following. Fill out what it is your injury was, go to your backyard, dig a hole, bury it, cover it up, water it, make sure it gets sunlight, and hope that compensation grows. That's literally what this program is. Who's your trier of fact? You don't know. Who's your judge? You don't know. What evidence? You don't know. Who's reviewing it? You don't know. Who's their expert? You don't know. Can you confront anybody? No. Is there a hearing? No. It is the most procedural due process, constitutionally violative thing you can even imagine. So we're in federal court right now seeking to challenge that. And so if you're injured by a COVID vaccine, your only remedy at the moment is the CICP. But our hope is if we prevail in this suit, and we feel real good we will, then that would be able to bring claims through other avenues. Separately, for all other vaccines, you still can't sue the manufacturer, but you can bring a claim in the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. That is where you sue the Secretary of HHS. It's in the Federal Court of Claims. We handle those claims, and the problem is that it's not a typical court. You don't get an Article 3 of the Constitution, Article 3 judge. You get a special master. You have no discovery as of right. The DOJ and the federal health authorities get all your records. They have all our money, by the way. They hire armies of doctors and experts to fight you. So, the VICP is the equivalent of basically fighting with your hands tied behind your back while the DOJ is wearing brass knuckles punching you in the face all day long. And they're policy driven. They're just certain injuries they will not accept, like deaths from children. They'll say, oh, it'll scare people away. So it's a very policy-driven program, in my opinion. And the DOJ gets to run the roost of the place for the most part. There's no court in America where if somebody sues you, the other side, the defendant gets, more than a month or 2 or 3. They get 9 months, 12 months after you sue them to even respond. It's ridiculous. Anyways, with that said, yes, we get calls all day long for all kinds of injuries from all vaccines, but our avenue for relief for COVID injuries is basically the CICP, which we don't even handle pretty much. And good luck with that program. By the way, even if you prevail, the whole program only has $7 million, and they spend almost all of it on overhead costs. So there's really no money to pay you anyway.
Right.
Then there's for all other vaccines, the VICP, we handle those, but it's only for a certain subset of injuries that the federal health authorities are willing to acknowledge, unfortunately.
Right. Well, we are over time. We thought we'd have you for 20 to 30 minutes, and you gave us over an hour. So we super appreciate your time. And we want to thank you. And I'm sure that Stephanie and Michelle want to wrap up with a few thoughts, but we want to thank you, Aaron Siri, for being on with us today. Please go to his website. If we could show that again, if you have questions or want to contact him, we have people. This will be showing live this is live now. It's on Rumble. And I'm sure that's probably one of the only places it'll be able to stay up, but we will have it on Rumble afterwards and be mailing it out to our networks. So thank you. Go to SiriLLP.com. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And one last thing.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Final word is I just want to thank all three of you genuinely for everything all three of you do and in all your different ways. Getting the message out about products or restrictions or government overreach, all the things that you cover on your show is critically important. Cultural cognition around an issue is so important to change laws and to get the courts to change. Gay marriage was never going to be a constitutional right. The Supreme Court was never going to find the constitutional right, whatever you think about that issue in the 1800s or 1910 or 1920. What changed? Cultural cognition change. And the same thing with all the issues that you cover on the show, and then Stephanie, you do in your scientific papers. All of these, all of that, everything you do is so critically important to change what people think about all of these issues, because without that, my job in the courts is so much harder. So thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so
Aaron.
much.
And thank you to Del Bigtree and the Informed Consent Action Network team. We are forever in gratitude to the courage and the dedication that they present every day. And if anybody can donate to that network, you will be supporting an extremely worthy cause. So thank you very much to the Informed Consent Action Network and to you, Aaron Siri.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is
Great.
wonderful.
All righty. Well, Dr. Pero, what do you have to say? Do you want to back up everything that was just said? I know there's probably a few burning points you want to make before we close the show?
Yeah, a couple quick points. Wow, we'll talk about a mind blow. That was like such a download. I'm a little spinning for all this fabulous information. I would say, because I'm the doc on the show, that just regarding this issue regarding censorship, we are in the place we are because of what happened 114 years ago in 1910 was the Flexner Report, when Rockefeller and Abraham Flexner, mostly Rockefeller, decided that the way we did natural medicine in the US, including homeopathy, herbs, all those wonderful treatments that are now integrative and coming back, were removed literally by Rockefeller and this gentleman who decided that it was quackery, and they wanted to bring the products from the oil industry into pharmaceuticals. And that's when pharmaceuticals took power, and they literally wiped out homeopathic education, which I'm a homeopath, UCSF, Boston College, Temple, Jefferson, New York Medical College. These were all homeopathic hospitals, by the way. They were across the country. So this issue of censorship in healthcare, we've been dealing with for longer than 100 years. And so it's not new. The battle's not new, but we are gaining traction every day. And I invite everyone to continue to support this work, continue to support GMO science, please, and the new MDs. Anything you donate to gmoscience.org for the new MDs will go to this program and supporting us to grow and to continue to get this word out there, and having amazing guests on like Aaron Siri, Dr. William Mackis, Dr. Renee Joy Dufault, and others. So I would just wrap up there, Zen. And this was just a fabulous show. I so appreciate Mr. Siri taking time to talk to us and our audience.
Thank you. And Stephanie Seneff, I'm sure you have something you want to add. Do you want to add a little bit about your background and censorship in science and journals?
Well, I would particularly mention the article that I wrote together with colleagues and published in the peer-reviewed journal Curious, COVID-19 mRNA vaccines, lessons learned from the registrational trials and global vaccination campaign. That was a paper all about the Pfizer trials and how they were corrupt. They were not done properly. And we showed, it's a very long paper, many references, very well backed up, a tremendous interest. We got hundreds of thousands of views on that paper in Curious. And then they, of course, the industry got, worried that we were getting so much attention, and pressure was put on the journal to retract the paper, and they did retract it. That's my first retracted paper. And it's very frustrating because we showed there that those trials were grossly inadequate and that there was corruption involved in the way that it was done. And it's been retracted, but luckily there's another journal, let's see.
IJTPR,
I lost it. International Journal of Vaccine Theory, Practice, and Research, IJTP, something like that.
IJTPR.
Yes, it's a more obscure journal. It's not listed in PubMed, which of course you can't be if you're going to be speaking out on these things. And that journal has done a tremendous job of publishing a lot of papers showing the bad outcomes with COVID-19. They've been wonderful with the vaccines in particular. And this paper is being republished by in this at the bottom of this show here, IJVTPR. That's the one that has the republished version of part 1, which is on the trials, and then we have a part 2 that we're working on very hard. The combination of those two papers is actually longer, more detailed, and more current results. We did an upgrade on the original paper into 2 long papers, lots and lots of references showing both the toxicity of the vaccines and the inadequate trials that were done to get them approved. So I'm very pleased that there are these journals that I really want to emphasize, these journals that are sprouting like dandelions, actually, that are outside of PubMed. And because they're outside of PubMed, they get ignored. But there's the alternative community is well aware, and you get a lot of publicity from those, papers that are published in these more obscure journals. You still get a lot of attention through social media from the people who are aware of what's going on. So it's another way to get your information out when the mainstream is very severely censoring the truth on the topic of these vaccines.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And, to wrap up, we really do want to bring it home, as Aaron Siri mentioned, don't censor yourself. And I just like to share a personal story. When I was back just starting and getting to talk about GMOs and glyphosate, as we all did, more than a decade ago, some of us almost 2 decades ago. I was talking with a mom at a barbecue by the school. There was a barbecue after school. It was like one of the last days of school or something like that. And I just met her, and her son was running around with my children, and he was overweight and very overactive and hyper. And she was embarrassed. She was like, "I'm so sorry. My son is, acting like this." And she said, "I just don't know what to do." She was exasperated. And I said, "Well, have you heard about, like what's going on with the food supply?" And she's like, "No, what do you mean?" And I told her about GMOs, and then I told her a little bit about glyphosate. And when I started getting to the point about how glyphosate is actually causes endocrine disruption and miscarriages, it seemed like it felt sort of heavy to me for a moment. And I said, "Hang on, am I saying too much?" And she looked at me and she said, "No, this is my kid you're talking about. You've got to tell me." And I realized I do got to tell her. And that my natural tendency was to censor myself. And so many of us do that. We don't just automatically share with people the information that we have in our head because we think it's going to be weird. We think we're going to offend people. We think somebody's going to be mad. And most importantly, we think we're going to look bad. And I would invite everyone to set aside those concerns and to speak up and to speak out. And to, if you maybe you don't want to just blurt it out and say it, ask first, "Can I share this with you? Is that okay? Can I share something I just learned?" When people give their permission, their ears are going to open up, and they're going to be more receptive to hearing what you have to say. And now is one of the most important times in history ever to speak up and to say what you know, whether it's anecdotal or these scientific facts like Erin Siri just gave us. Only 5 days of follow-up for some of these vaccines. Glyphosate, they fed shrimp. I've read scientific studies that I got from the EPA. 4 days they studied shrimp and oysters after exposure to glyphosate. What happened on the 5th day, right? What happened on the 6th day? So this is the kind of junk science that's being used to justify toxic chemicals and medications in our food supply and in our medical system. And this is the problem with censorship, where they're hiding this type of information from you and from all of us. So this is why this type of show is so important. So we want to thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Michelle Perro. Thank you to Erin Siri. Thank you, Stephanie Seneff, for speaking out. I think we might need to do a follow-up show with hearing more about, we did so much research and you have so many other stories to share. But we do invite you to go to gmoscience.org. We will have this show up there, and we will have the resources that we prepared for the show that we didn't get to touch upon in that article and on the website, as well as we will be referring back to it, of course, through momsacrossamerica.org, and Stephanie Seneff's website is filled with information, and the new MDs will be on Rumble for you to access as much as you can and share it with other people. Anything else anybody wants to add before we close?
Thank you, Zen.
Great show. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for being with us today on the new MDs. We'll see you next month.